I saw a man on the brink of becoming Prime Minister. I said, "How do you feel?" And he said, "I don't feel anything."
It's a weird beat, isn't it? The Sunday political beat. It's kind of not like anything else.
These stories in the Sunday papers on the front page, they're all made up, you know. On the very first morning that I started writing Fatherland, I just knew then this is what I want to do. The old acquaintance with Tony Blair, Alistair Campbell really didn't want this. Can friendship and power go together? It's pretty rare, to be honest.
This is a global production.
Robert Harris, I hadn't realised quite how much you'd done. It's professionally speaking. There's sort of 2 or 3 acts here, including protege to Jeremy Paxman at one point.
Yes, I owe him a lot, actually, because we worked together on Panorama when I was only about 22, and we made a programme about the history of chemical and biological warfare, and a publisher rang him and said, "Would you like to do a book?" And he said, and he came to me and he said, "Shall we do it together?" So that was the first book I ever wrote, was with him and thanks to him.
And you went, I think people tend to go the other way now. You went from broadcasting to print.
Yeah.
People these days, I think most people in print think life in broadcasting is both better paid and quite a bit easier. But
yeah, that's right. I was a rare thing, but I was always more of a writer than a television person.
And you are that very rare journalist who actually delivers on the dream that almost all of us have when we start, which is, of course, to
get out of it.
To get out of it one day and start writing actual books.
Yes.
Which you did. But we'll begin at the beginning, which is in Nottinghamshire, on a Nottingham council estate, in fact, with parents who were, and it's one of those phrases that remains quite hard to pin down, but an avowedly working class childhood.
Yes, I mean, both my parents left school at 14, and my father was a printer, so, you know, wore overalls, and he was a very good printer. I was born in Nottingham. We lived in a council house for the first 6 years of my life, and then we moved into, my parents bought a new build, I went to a comprehensive school. Didn't want to play any kind of violin about this. I had a very happy childhood, never felt at all deprived in it, but it certainly wasn't a middle class family.
It comes up a lot in this series, the fact that we only have one childhood, therefore we only have one frame of reference when we're children, and therefore people rarely do feel that they're missing out on things because they don't know what is happening on the other side of town.
What did it mean? We never went abroad for a holiday, but we go to sort of, you know, mainly we went to Norfolk, to Wales next to the sea, and
before it was fashionable.
Certainly wasn't fashionable. We used to go camping, and if there was one vow I had when I grew up, it was that I'd never go camping again, and I never have.
Carrying your own toilet roll across a campsite is not an experience.
Yeah, and the sound of the rain coming down on the canvas and the zipping sound. If I hear them now, it brings back chills.
But it was clearly, I hope this is the right word to use, it was clearly an intellectual house. I mean, it was a house where the inner life was acknowledged.
They both would have gone to university these days, of course. And when people moan about the number of people going and, that half the country goes now, I think of them and I think, this is progress, actually. Because they were clever. My father was a great reader and self-taught, and he read James Joyce and Arnold Bennett and Graham Greene and passed them on to me. Georges Simenon was another person he liked a lot, and I used to read those green-spined penguins.
Voracious, then.
Very, was... anything. Children's books like Just William, Sherlock Holmes I adored. I'd always had a book in my hand.
You got to school and presumably you were a little bit ahead of the curve given what had been going on at home. Like just a local primary school.
Yeah, it's a local...
Is it pit country, this?
School... Not really, no. Close to it, but no. I mean, but, we weren't very far from D.H. Lawrence land. It was... local school and always bookish, not very good at many things actually. I was hopeless at maths and sciences, But anything that involved reading, so that touched on history as well, I was very at home with.
And did teachers pick up on this?
Yes. I mean, when I look back at my school reports, which I haven't done for a long time, but I did find them a few years ago, I was quite naughty, actually. I mean, they're not the reports of some sort of studious child at all, but of slightly rebellious and cheeky in a way.
There's a sense of mischief that runs through all of your life, isn't there? I mean, when you got to Cambridge as well, you were usually causing trouble. Or
yes, I was nearly sent down from Cambridge for inviting the great train robbers to speak.
There's a lovely line there. It said the only one who didn't come was Ronnie Biggs, and you sort of think, yeah, I think I know
why. Yes, Buster Edwards came. It was... I've always made a bit of mischief. It seems to me one of the things that actually writers, journalists should do is stir things up, cause some trouble, and I've never been frightened of controversy.
Was it an aspirational upbringing? Was it clear that your parents wanted more for you than they'd got for themselves?
Oh, definitely. I think my father wanted me to be a solicitor in Nottingham. I remember him telling me that I could earn £100 a week, which to him was that was the aspiration. They never thought of writing or anything like that. And even when I got into the BBC as a trainee when I was 21, they were slightly sort of wary. And my father, whenever I saw him, would always say, "Are they pleased with you?" Oh. I remember that was it was old-fashioned, I would say, as much as anything else. Old-fashioned books, documentaries on the television, a lot of talk about politics, any questions, that sort of thing. It was great, really.
Yeah, and did you have an accent? Has your accent eroded over the years?
I think I've still got a slight flat A East Midlands Nottingham accent, but I suppose a lot of it was knocked out of me by just moving out when I was 18.
That means that at some point at secondary school, you know, regardless of not being very good at maths or science, you'd clearly demonstrated enough ability at English and history, or essay-based subjects, yes. I presume, for them to say you could set your sights that high.
Yeah, I was good at exams, and the moment I got to A-levels, I was really in my element, because then I became specialists in English, history and geography, and those I could do. And the nightmare of sitting not understanding chemical formulas or that passed away. And so really I took off in the sixth form, and it was one of those things that used to happen back in the 70s. My English teacher had been at Cambridge, and the college kept in touch with those that had gone on to be teachers. And he put me forward because he thought I could maybe do English. So I went and had an interview and took the exam, and then I got in.
Was it one or two children a year that would have been put up for those exams at the time?
I think in that year there were 4. Okay. It was a big school, mind you. It was 1,700, 1,800 pupils. But it got people in, yeah.
And I suspect because of your background, because of what your mum and dad had created at home, you were both daunted and not daunted by this. So, I mean, it was a world of letters, and you had grown up in a world of letters, and yet it was also a world of class distinctions that would have been a bit of a shock to you. Maybe.
I was eager to... I mean, I loved my upbringing, but I was eager to get on and get out into the world, and I didn't find Cambridge daunting, to be honest with you, when I look back. I think maybe because I was so young, I was only just 18, I just took to it. First week, I went to the kind of lunch or kind of thing for the student paper, signed up to work on that, met a few people I still know, so like Tom Sutcliffe, the journalist who presents Front Row. I met him when I was 18. We both worked on the paper, and I just, by doing the writing, I was not daunted particularly. I really enjoyed it. That's simple as that.
So we've been hearing a lot recently about Andy Burnham's imposter syndrome when he arrived at Cambridge. Obviously,
well, I think that wasn't he known as the coolest guy in the college. I mean, I think that this is Labour politicians like to hype it all up.
They like a mythology, don't they? I think.
They do, but I certainly. I mean, of course, some people would have felt it, but for some reason, I didn't. And I've never felt attached to
So
it.
where had the journalistic, if you turn up at Varsity in your first week, where had those seeds been sown? At
Well,
school?
I was editor of the school newspaper, which was a weekly, and I turned it into a kind of scandal sheet in many ways, and but I caused a lot of trouble with it. That was very amusing. I founded my own newspaper in the village during a school holiday and went round and delivered it door to door. And I was just always writing. I mean, the first thing I ever bought was a typewriter, a Remington Portable, which I still have. I taught myself to type. You know, it's a great thing in life to only be able to do one thing. Do you know what I mean?
Yes,
there was never any great discussion as to whether I might be a nuclear physicist or a carpenter.
It's like when you're in a restaurant and the menu is enormous. You've got absolutely no idea what to have. It's so much easier if they just tell you.
Yes. The smaller the menu, the better the restaurant. And there was only one thing I was ever going to do, and that cleared the way for me. I was fortunate.
When did you realise you were good at it, Robert?
I realised when I was sort of in the sixth form that I had a knack for polemic. I could stir people up with words, so that I became aware of that. I wrote plays as well. If you've ever seen that film Rushmore, that's me, the guy in that. So I did plays as well. I was just
hyperactive then, or at least very productive.
A lot of energy, yes. But then I never played any sport. I used to hide away and never do that. And I actually managed to fix myself up with an office with a telephone in my comprehensive school.
Who would you ring?
The telephone wasn't actually for me. It was something to do with the department, but at any rate, I used it. And so there's more than a touch of Sergeant Bilko also in my... it was a great time. And it was a really good comprehensive school. It's still got the vestiges of the old grammar school, but it had a very progressive headmaster who'd actually been a conscientious objector in the war. I was chairman of the local Labour Party, and they really encouraged you to do extracurricular things.
The only other guest on Full Disclosure who I think had a phone when they were at school was Rupert Everett, but his was not connected. He just used to sit in a stairwell at Ampleforth, pretending that he was talking to his agent back in London, but there was the wire just drifted off under the carpet. There was nobody.
Very good.
There was nobody on the other end of it. I mean, politics at home were Labour politics, not just at school. When you mentioned that your parents bought their own house when you were, I think, 6, were you, or 8?
6, yeah.
6 years old. I mean, that could have been a fork in the road politically, couldn't it? I mean, it could have been a more...
Yes, I think my father got more Labour as he got older, actually. He was certainly a big supporter of Harold Wilson and then of Callaghan. I think he might have voted for Macmillan in 1959. He was part of that post-war working class generation that began to get a washing machine and a radiogram, and there was a general optimism and improvement in living standards that had started actually in the 1930s, but was interrupted by the war and then the austerity. And mid to late 1950s, it began to pick up again after a 20-year hiatus.
So sort of traditional Labour values, but not to the point of tribalism.
Well, it detested Margaret Thatcher. It was more almost opposition than anything else. He
wasn't fond of Alec Douglas Hume either, was he?
No.
Is this a true story?
It is.
It is. Everyone else comes back, what I did in the holidays, and you come back with why me and my dad don't like Sir Alec Douglas Hume.
That is completely correct, and I was to go on writing variations on that for the next 40 years.
Have you still got it?
No, alas, I would
Lost.
love to read it.
Lost
But
to
my
time.
Alec Douglas-Home, when he was Prime Minister in the '64 election, came to speak in Nottingham, and my father, I believe, went and heckled him in the town square.
So we're seeing some, perhaps, chips off the old block in terms of mischief and engagement and polemic. When you framed these journalistic ambitions, was there any nobility attached to it? Did you see it as a noble profession, or was it just the mischief and the facility to write that drew you to it?
I would say that I took it seriously.
Yeah.
I liked popularising subjects. I really enjoyed, and a very formative experience for me was working on the old Panorama programme, which used to go at 8:10 on BBC One, 50 minutes. This was before the days of cassette recorders, so VCRs, so that it went out and that was it. It was never seen again, and you had to. So you've got a big audience in those days, 5-6 million, with quite a complicated story, and you had to hook them at 8:10 and somehow hold them until the 9 o'clock news. And there were very good reporters like Jeremy and directors, but they were like going out on the road and getting the story, and they often, for me as a young researcher, they used to give me all the rushes and say, pull out what you think is best and how we might tell the story. So very early age, I found myself structuring things, and that was very formative. That was almost like being at university, to work to tell the story. How do you intercut the sync, as we called it, with the pictures and so on.
How did you end up at the BBC if writing was your first love?
Well, this was the end of the 70s, and the NUJ, the National Union of Journalists, had very strict entry rules, and you could only go to London and work in Fleet Street on a specialist paper, really, the Financial Times, which I didn't want to do. The only exemptions to this were the broadcasters, ITN, BBC, LWT.
Otherwise, you'd have had to come through the region.
Otherwise, I'd have had to go back to somewhere like Nottingham and work on a regional paper. And I was itching to get to London.
Right.
And so I rented a television during my time at Cambridge and kept up with programmes and applied to, there were 2 trainee schemes at the BBC, and I applied for both of them.
So you were, quite precocious, but also a man with a plan. You weren't floating around waiting for opportunity to present itself. You were knocking on doors.
Well, one thing, I don't hyping up my background, but it was I either made a success of it or, I fell quite a long way. I needed to
you were conscious
press
of
forward. Yeah. No,
yes,
definitely. I definitely. It wasn't. I couldn't be that dilettante about it because there was no safety net.
And no self-pity here. You're not looking at any of your Cambridge contemporaries and thinking, well, you'll be all right. You can live in mum and dad's flat in Pimlico and wait until the big time comes calling. You've got to go out there and try and find it yourself.
No, I never felt that. You
could have done. You could have been forgiven for doing so.
I suppose so. I just was. The thing is, when you're 2021, you are optimistic. A lot of people go out. I've got 4 children. People are always saying things are tough for young people, and they are tough for young people. But they do have youth. They do have the energy and the optimism that comes. And I often think when one worries about them, you forget that actually. You're looking at it through the lens of someone who's getting a bit, tired and stale and nervous about mortgages or whatever, and you're just not like that at that age. And so I didn't feel any great resentment, and of course, in a way, it worked out for me.
Back up briefly, how big a deal was it to Mum and Dad when you got into Cambridge, not just to university, but to Cambridge University?
Oh, huge, I think. Yeah, they were tremendously proud. And they used to, that awful thing when your parents drive you down at the beginning of term and you can't wait to get shot of them. But they would just stay in Cambridge even after they dropped me off because they just were so excited about it. It definitely was, yes, a big thing for them.
And were you our Robert? Would it be our Robert?
Rob.
I
was Rob. The only people that ever called me Rob were my mother and father and Neil Kinnock. And,
When did you start? I mean, maybe you didn't, but you're at Panorama now. You're offered a fair old lick. Published at 25, the book that you mentioned earlier that you co-wrote with Jeremy Paxman, A Higher Form of Killing, the secret story of gas and germ warfare. When did you start?
Cheery, huh?
Yes, it's not a comedy, is it? When did you, and a year later, you did a book about the Falklands, I think.
Yeah, that was my breakthrough, really. I was working on Newsnight. The BBC was in a huge row all the time with the government. And I thought, this is quite a good story. And so I wrote a very quick book. I took 6 weeks off over the summer, built up, leave that I was owed, and I wrote it in the summer of '82, and it came out in '83.
So you're the polar opposite of that old Peter Cook joke, isn't it? Of one journalist says to another, "I'm writing a book," and the other one says, "Neither am I." You really got your finger out.
Yeah, no, I was quite driven. That is certainly true. Always was. Always pushing forward.
It's storytelling, though, isn't it? Whether you're putting together a Panorama film or whether you're thinking this one's got a book in it. Had that thing, the Paxman collaboration notwithstanding, were you always on the lookout for a book you could write?
Yes, I like long form. Obviously, as a journalist, I then moved into print. I made my money, as it were, my living, by writing columns, 1,200 words or whatever. But really, the best journalism I could do actually were those longer 2,500 word what happened in the week that you get in the Sunday papers, which I used to do for the Observer. But the longer the form, the happier I was. And so books were something I really enjoyed doing. And I wrote several non-fiction books. I did Gotcha, as it was called, about the media in the Falklands. Then I did a biography of Neil Kinnock, just when he became leader of the Labour Party. And those two brought me to the attention of newspapers. And therefore, when a vacancy came free at the Observer, Anthony Howard, who was the deputy editor, who was a great mentor of mine, he rang me up and said, "Do you want to apply for the political editor's job?" And I had a comfortable billet by then at the BBC. I'd been a reporter on Newsnight and on Panorama, but it was just going to be more of the same. And I was 29, and I thought, come on, if you're going to take a risk in life, do it now.
So there's no... did you enjoy being on screen? Because clearly you didn't enjoy it so much that you couldn't contemplate not being on screen anymore.
I didn't think I'd ever be good enough to be in the studio. Obviously, Jeremy went that way very consciously, took the decision to stop being a reporter, and he went off and presented the London regional programme and then breakfast television. I got to the top, really, of being a reporter as a reporter on Panorama, and I realised that actually that would be it, and that eventually I could just, with a bit of luck, I could have gone on doing it for 10 or 20 years, but there was this chance to go and learn how to be a print journalist, and so I thought, I won't be able to look at myself in the mirror if I turn it down. And sometimes in life you really have to force yourself to do something, and those early weeks on the Observer were not happy.
Why not?
Because I'd never written news stories, because the news, it's quite a solitary thing, getting news stories. There was maybe mild resentment that I'd been brought in from outside the paper. I mean, all that quickly fell away, and I made wonderful friends, and the great political columnists there, Alan Watkins and Tony Howard, taught me a lot. They both wrote their articles with a fountain pen. I mean, that was how long ago it was. But they were prose stylists. And after a few months, then I was really much more at home.
How did you come into Tony Howard's orbit? How did he...
I used to... Among the many things that I did, I was chairman of the kind of Labour Club or Fabian Society at Cambridge, and he came and spoke there when he was editor of the New Statesman.
Right.
So I sort of met him then, and because I'd written that book on Kinnock, I think, which was reviewed, and and he was a political writer himself, Tony. I think that's how I was spotted.
What were you like at Scoops then? Because before you became a sort of long-form columnist, could you go Sundays? It's a weird beat, isn't it? The Sunday political beat. It's kind of not like anything else.
That's really where I wrote fiction and learned to write it.
I didn't want to go that far.
There's a very funny story Alan Watkins wrote he wrote a very funny memoir called A Short Walk Down Fleet Street, and I'm in it, and I go up to him rather puzzled one day and say, These stories in the Sunday papers on the front page, they're all made up, And it's true that about Donald Trelford was the editor of the paper, and at about 4:00 on a Saturday afternoon, I'd see him bearing down towards me across the newsroom, carrying a few bits of scraps of agency copy, which I somehow had to work up into a story that could go above the fold and would last until lunchtime. That was the main thing. So I wasn't very good at getting great scoops. What I did develop a knack for was, I say, with the longer pieces, what had happened in the week, and there I did get some scoops actually. Nothing anyone would remember now, but the calamitous attempt by the Social Democrats. There was a leader who burst into tears in the middle of some meeting. I was told about that. I had quite good sources in the Liberals and the Labour Party, and virtually nothing in the Tory Party.
Which was problematic, given that the Tory Party was in charge.
And given also that the Observer was at war with Mrs. Thatcher.
Yes.
Something to do with Mark Thatcher, was it? I can't remember now. But anyway, there was very bad blood. But Bernard Ingham, her press secretary, was always very generous to me, actually.
What would the week involve then? So you get, obviously, Sunday and Monday off, and then you not a great deal to do on Tuesdays, Wednesdays, and Thursdays.
Well, Prime Minister's Questions used to be on Tuesdays and Thursdays, so my working week would really begin on a Tuesday afternoon. I had a desk in the House of Commons. I was in the lobby. What was a revelation to me, because I'd always been fascinated by politics, but I really didn't like the House of Commons. It was dusty air, gave me a headache quite often.
Still is.
Yes, it wasn't. I didn't like it very much. So, yes, I'd go there on a Tuesday, and then really there'd be an editorial conference on Wednesday morning, and that's really when the week would begin.
And you enjoyed it after you got through that initial few months. There's still a sense of momentum. You're still pushing forward. You're still stretching yourself and looking for new things to enjoy. That's
right. And they were going to take me off. They offered me Washington correspondent after I'd done 2 years as political editor. But in the interim, dear Tony Howard launched a coup against Trelford to try and become editor of the paper. Whilst Trelford was out of the office, he tried to get the job. What he unfortunately didn't know was that Trelford was on the proprietor's yacht at the time. So the coup failed, and he was fired effectively. And I thought, he brought me in. I'm going to go too, actually. And because at this point they'd brought my predecessor back, Adam Raphael, and that was very uncomfortable. I mean, he really tried to cause me difficulties. So I resigned. And
in solidarity with Tony Howard.
In solidarity with Tony Howard. And I had no other job to go to. And that on that Saturday afternoon, and it was in the Press Gazette or something, and on that Saturday afternoon I was sitting in the Observer offices and in the newsroom, and the phone went, and it was Andrew Neil, the editor of the great rival paper, the Sunday Times, saying, "I hear you're leaving. Do you want to come and write a column for me?" So I went and saw Andrew, and
so you only had about an hour and a half of examining the soul and wondering whether you'd made a terrible mistake.
I know, but still, that was another great break, really, because then Andrew said, This is the peak Thatcher year, really. This was the beginning of '89.
Peak Sunday Times as well.
Yes, and he said, I want you to write a column to annoy Sunday Times readers. I don't want, go at Thatcher, go at the government, So, okay, fine. And he paid me more than I was getting full-time at the Observer. And so I started doing that, and I'd had this idea for a novel, and this gave me the time then to develop it.
Because you didn't have to worry about scoops and things now. You just got to do a kind of State of the Nation piece every Saturday for Sunday.
Yes, really. I had to hand it in Friday
Right,
lunchtime,
okay.
but yes, exactly that, and it freed me up. Really, There was no point in worrying about what you're going to write in a column until Wednesday or Thursday because anything can happen. So, it gave me Monday and the weekend and Monday and Tuesday to just write a book.
And that book was Not Selling Hitler.
No.
That was the book that gave the idea for the book, as it were.
The non-fiction went...
So you were just knocking these non-fiction books out for fun, effectively?
For fun, for the challenge, for the pleasure of it, for supplementing income. I mean,
But you knew you wanted to write a novel at some point?
No, I
didn't.
didn't.
Know that.
No,
okay.
I never knew. I never, at any point in my career, knew what I was going to do. Actually, Things came along, and I thought, well, I'll have a go at that. So I did the book on Kinnock, and then I did the book on the Hitler Diaries fiasco,
which was a Sunday Times story, wasn't it?
Which caused me some difficulties at the beginning with the Sunday Times, but then and it was as I was writing, or when I'd finished Selling Hitler, that I thought, which had entailed reading Hitler's table talk and his plans for how the world would be after his victory, that I thought this would make a good non-fiction book. I tried to write it as non-fiction, but I found it was so speculative, it was just hopeless. And also, the two great questions were, well, how would the world, would this settle, he wanted to settle 20 million Germans in Ukraine. Would they have wanted to go there, I thought? And also, assuming the war would have ended with America undefeated, how would they have explained the disappearance of European Jews? And would it have been like the victims of Stalin and Mao, and the West would simply have said, okay, well, still we'll have détente despite it. And that meant that I could only tackle that by fiction. And so I had an idea for a plot, and it was simply, I used fiction as a tool for non-fiction, if you like, to answer the questions, but I couldn't do it with facts.
Well, the best historical fiction does that, doesn't it? I think usually, or at least it gives you. You're turning the page not just because of the plot, but also because of the lessons that you're learning.
Yes, I think it's good if a book has a point as well as a sort of story, and generally for me, the books are to answer a question. What would this have been like? What if? And I often go back to history because I grew up in the shadow of the Second World War, and the choices that were made and the way that it's been portrayed ever since, I feel that one of the big stories that's always interested me.
And the question here, because we're talking about Fatherland, for anybody who needs colour by numbers guidance through this conversation, the question here is what if Hitler had won, really?
Yes.
Was that... It's hard to imagine now, but when we're sort of back to the late 1980s, was that quite a novel inquiry? As in, I mean, were many people wondering that? Was it?
Well, no, not really. I think there had been documentaries, and there was a book called a documentary, If Britain Had Fallen. Noel Coward, I think, wrote a play.
Okay.
And above all, there was Len Deighton's SSGB, which imagined the German occupation of Britain. I had something different in mind, which was Berlin and Germany after Hitler had won, and set in 1964 on the eve of his 75th birthday, with the idea of the American, when it's announced that the American president is going to pay a state visit to Berlin. That was a novel concept, and I think that the thing that made the book more pertinent was that whilst I was writing it, the Berlin Wall came down and Germany began to reunify, and people were alarmed at the thought of this superpower, 80-odd million Germans, once again in the heart of Europe. And that, I think, gave the book a kind of journalistic almost edge.
Yes. I mean, you've had many ideas since. Is there a common thread? I mean, do you have a moment where something just clicks inside you and you go, oh boy, this is going to work?
Yeah, I think yes, as I came to the end of writing Fatherland, for example, there was a Horizon documentary about Alan Turing. And I thought, that's an interesting idea for a novel, a code breaker at Bletchley Park who breaks a code he's not supposed to see, or something like that. That was all I thought, and that was a journey, sort of a journey of 3 years, really, to write that. So yes, things just sort of. You never know where an idea is going to come from.
Timings here are quite funny. The novels, then, from what we've discussed so far, and I think you're only 35 when Fatherland comes out, but this is the first time I sense so far that you would be quite happy doing this for the next 30 or 40 years in a way that you wouldn't have been happy to stay at Panorama, or you wouldn't have been happy to carry on writing columns.
No, I'd come home. On the very first morning that I started writing Fatherland, I just knew then this is what I want to do. It was really funny. I actually had to go and lie down. I remember it was a Saturday afternoon. I wrote the first paragraph of Fatherland, which is exactly the same as it is in the book.
Gosh.
And I thought, it was like Vertigo. I sort of went and lay down. I thought, I can do anything. Anything can now happen. It was. It sounds very obvious, but it had never occurred to me, really. Yeah. I can make this whole thing up.
You're a master of this universe.
Yes, exactly. It was
exhilarating.
A tremendous feeling. So I've never wanted to do anything else. I've never wanted to be a screenwriter or a playwright, novels are the thing for me.
You're riding two horses for a while, though, because the success of Fatherland, which we'll get on to shortly, sort of coincides with your meetings with Tony Blair when he tells you, and I think you initially disagreed that Labour were going to lose in '83. You were quite close to Kinnock, I think. You were certainly an admirer of Neil Kinnock's. And Tony Blair then, becomes quite a big fan of yours, and you become quite a big fan of him.
Yes, I moved to the Sunday Times in '89, and I'm in a little ghetto, really, of the left-wing column. It was even put in different type to the rest of the paper. And then gradually things...
Was it really?
Yes, yes. Then things began to change, and the Thatcher premiership began to hit the rocks.
Are you going to claim the credit for this?
No, most certainly not. But I was shifted then from being the kind of alternative columnist to the main columnist.
Got it, yes.
And this was all credit to Andrew Neil, because my views hadn't particularly changed. But the
country had.
Yeah, and he was a big supporter of Heseltine. The paper came out for Heseltine when he stood against Thatcher. So I moved across, and suddenly it looked like Labour might be in with a chance, and so I was writing the main column in '92 when there was an election, and as you say, I was rung up by Tony Blair's office, and he was then, I think, shadow employment spokesman, and they said he'd like to meet you and have lunch. So I went and had lunch with him in Lescargo. And we got on very well, and because it was a general assumption that Labour were going to win, and he said, "Oh no, we're not. We haven't changed enough, and the tax is going to do for us, and then so we're going to lose, and then there's going to be a real reckoning. We've got to change the party, and I don't know whether you'd like to be involved in that, but it would be great if you wanted to be," and so on. And then. I don't know what would have happened if I hadn't written Fatherland, actually, looking back on it. But actually, I said to him, well, I've just written this novel, so I'm packing in the column. So I think he put that down as a wasted lunch.
Should be on expenses.
And yeah.
And you knew. I mean, so, well, a word then on how quickly Fatherland became huge.
Yes, I had been paid by a British publisher to given an advance to write it because they thought it was a good idea. And I started writing it, got stuck, put it aside for a year, went back to it, said it was 50-50 whether I was ever going to finish it. But I thought, come on, let's give it 6 months. At this point, my wife had just had our first baby and she wasn't working. So I needed to earn twice what I normally did. So I had to do a column and a book. So I thought, let's try and get this done. And I wrote the first third. And I made big changes. I was at one point telling it from multiple points of view, and I decided it was only interesting when the German policeman was on the page, and then and to supplement the income, I had the idea of writing a biography of John le Carré, and I wrote to him and said, "What do you think?" And he said, "Well, I won't encourage you, but I won't try and stop you." And armed with this, I said I offered to publishers in Britain and America a biography of le Carré, and this went to America, and along with the first third of Fatherland.
Okay.
And I remember walking up the street to home and getting home, and the phone rang, and it was my American agent to say that 7 publishers were interested in this first third of Fatherland, and forget the le Carré. He said, "This is what we go for," and it duly sold, and It went for more money, the American hardback rights, than all the money I'd ever earned as a journalist up to that point. And so, obviously, everything changed. My life just changed then. It was quite nerve-wracking as I still had to finish the book. But
and also, I mean, it's quite a hefty responsibility. And I know that you get to keep the money regardless of whether you sell any books or not. But there was no absolute guarantee, despite the publisher's instincts. There was no absolute guarantee that it would be a smash.
No, there was no guarantee. And when I then came to write the second book, I had terrible writer's block, the worst writer's block that I ever had.
Because of the
my
success
life.
of the first one.
Yes, and I didn't know how
do I follow this?
I don't know how I'd done it. I felt an imposter, I suppose. And so that was the first time really in my career that I was checked.
Okay.
I was, and of course,
was that frightening?
It was, and it was frustrating. We moved to the country. It seemed to
the
rain.
house that Hitler built.
You know, oh God, the jokes.
It's going to haunt you, isn't it?
It is. It seemed we moved to the country with 2 young children, and it never seemed to stop raining. And I just sat in this big old Gothic house we'd bought. The rain came through the ceiling, and I struggled to try and put Enigma together, and it was a very different book to Fatherland. But I didn't have to write Fatherland 2. I didn't do, I did something completely different, and that again was a good thing to do while I was still quite young.
Liberating, actually. It's also getting off rails, aren't you? You're not straitjacketed to the...
Yeah, thereafter... I learned my lesson, and I thought, well, I'm not going to just sit here in the rain trying to figure out a novel. I must do some journalism to keep my hand in. So although I always found column writing quite hard, I went back to the Sunday Times and did a column for about 2 years or something like that.
As something of a conquering hero, though, as well. I mean, you'd have been a very different byline post-Fatherland to what you would have been before, from a reader's point of view, if not your colleagues.
Yeah, I suppose so. I was also the old acquaintance with Tony Blair, who now, of course, had inherited the Labour Party after the death of John Smith. And immediately I struck up a rapport with him to the extent that when the election of 97 came along, he wanted me to travel around everywhere with him and write the campaign book. Alistair Campbell really didn't want this and stopped me going for the first 2 weeks.
Why do you think that was?
Well, of course, he was keeping his own diary for a start.
Oh, I see. All right. So it wasn't.
But also, I think
competition.
probably quite understandably, if they were desperately trying to win an election, he didn't want some guy from the Sunday Times sitting in on every strategy meeting and flying everywhere. But when it was about halfway through, Blair obviously decided he was going to win, and he rang me up and said, "Ignore Alistair, just come." And we're in Southampton, I think it was, or something like that. Come to the hotel, and Angie will give you your accreditation. And so I was given the accreditation as a member of the leader of the Labour Party's office.
Wow!
And Alistair greeted me. It looked like a cigar had just gone off, blown up in his face. But then he settled down, and it was fine. So the last 2 weeks or so of the campaign, I was there through it.
Did you enjoy proximity to power? Because you hadn't really had it before, had you?
No, it was fascinating, and I although I later had some falling out with Tony Blair, I will always be grateful for him letting me in and letting me see that, because I saw a man on the brink of becoming Prime Minister with a landslide and got to just sit with him. I was actually standing on the living room rug watching the television in his constituency home when David Dimbleby announced the results of the exit poll and said it will be Labour with a majority of 140.
What did he do?
I said, "How do you feel?" And he said, "I don't feel anything." And then the phone went, and it was Bill Clinton calling to congratulate. It was an epic night, because before that I'd been to his constituency house, and it was quite just a normal house. When I went back that night to be with him when he got the result, which had been agreed I would be allowed that access, it was ringed by men with machine guns. It was a totally different atmosphere, because of course everyone knew that this was the transfer of power. And so to see that, to be a novelist, very few journalists get that access.
Yeah.
But to be a novelist to get that access.
That's what I was thinking.
Well, that was real. That was gold dust.
And are you in full eyewitness mode, or is there a little bit of you that's thinking, "Crikey, Rob, you've come a long way from Violet Road"?
I don't think I did feel that.
No.
I mean, of course, bear in mind that I now had to write 3,500 words. So
It
there was not a lot of
yes. It never stops.
No, it was so desperate tight time frame that I prevailed upon the editor of the Sunday Times, by then John Witherow, to charter a plane to fly me back from the north to London in the early hours of the morning, so I could go straight into the office to write the piece, which had to be done.
No time for self-reflection when you're on deadline.
No, there wasn't. And I mean, that's good. Good training, really, as a writer. You've just simply got to do it. There's no point in being precious about it. A lot of quite serious professional people are standing around waiting for you to do your job. Yeah. Thank you very much.
Thinking about that falling out, it was over Iraq that you kind of, there's a parting of the ways. Is there, when you start, because you could next turn your attention to ancient Rome in the next book, is there an interest? Are you conscious of a fascination with the timelessness of the machinery of power, or am I pompously overthinking your own?
No,
course?
That you're completely correct. Politics, power, the people that pursue it, what it does to them, the dangers of power, the need for checks and balances, the endless struggle of politics, the drama of it, the conspiracies, the ambition, the decision to strike, the defeat, the trying to fight your way out of a tight corner, the betrayal by close friends. I mean, it's such rich territory that it's endlessly fascinating to me.
And when you put it like that, it's almost inevitable that you would, for Pompeii, that you'd be leaving the 20th century behind and heading back to ancient Rome.
Well,
except that there's no inkling so far in what we've been talking about that would be fertile territory for you.
No, I wrote 3 novels, Fatherland set in Germany in the 1960s, Enigma set in Britain in the 1940s, and then Archangel kind of set in the present day, but about Stalin. And then I thought I should write about America next, having done those three countries. And I thought we're now at nearly the turn of the century, 2000, and I thought I'll write a novel set slightly in the future, because everyone was the fall of the Berlin Wall and the end of politics, and I just knew that this was fool's paradise. There's something going to go wrong big time here. And so I started trying to write a novel about a kind of Walt Disney-like company that sets up a kind of utopian community, and then it all goes wrong. But I couldn't get it to work. And then there was a report in the Daily Telegraph, I remember, saying, new research on the destruction of Pompeii. And I suddenly thought, why don't I write about Rome in an allegorical way through the destruction of Pompeii? And that's how that book came about. And my publishers were pretty shocked. There is a quite funny story, and perfectly true, that I was having lunch with my editor. I'd already was years behind delivering my fourth novel, and I said, I want to change it from this book about America. She said, oh, yes. I said, I want to write about ancient Rome. And I'll never forget the fork, her food poised, the fork poised on its way to her mouth. And she said, what? And I said, well, there are lots of interesting characters. And she said, like who, darling? And I said, well, Pliny the Elder. And she said, could we make it Pliny the Younger? Which I couldn't. But on I went, and it again was, just talking to you, I see there are just these points where you just make a leap, from television, from newspapers, from columnists to novelist, and this was within novels. This was another leap.
It's a huge leap,
and but it worked because for whatever reason, it hit its time.
The legend is that you turned up at Blackwell's and bought all 29 Loeb volumes of Cicero. Had you not? I mean, did you know much about ancient Rome before you sat down to write this book?
No, that the Cicero books I bought after I'd finished
for the Cicero trilogy.
Yes.
So, what did you know about ancient Rome when you sat down to write Pompeii?
Nothing really, nothing more than a general reader. I had been to Pompeii and been mightily impressed by it. And one of the features of my books is they generally they are set in a world. Hitler's Berlin, Bletchley Park, Stalin's Kremlin, and Pompeii. To actually set a novel in that town or in the Bay of Naples, around the Bay of Naples, that really appealed to me. But I didn't know much about it, so it was well over a year's research, maybe two, going down to the Bay of Naples. It was a wonderful time there, wonderful. And I went out thinking initially that this was a silly idea and I wouldn't be able to make it work. And I arrived in Pompeii ahead of the family who were coming on for a family holiday. And it was August, and I walked through the centre of the town, and the sun was beating down on my back, and I could see Vesuvius ahead and could smell water. And that was a moment of epiphany, because I thought everything I'm experiencing now would have been experienced 2,000 years ago. Maybe I could do this. And I went in search of the source of the smell of water drying on stone, that very typical smell. And it was where the aqueduct came into Pompeii. Gosh. And I thought, this must have been interrupted when a few days before the town was destroyed. Why don't I write about the guy who had to run the aqueduct? And that was the breakthrough moment, because it had not been done before, and so I found myself writing a Roman techno thriller, as it were, spread over 4 or 5 days.
And do you still get now that sense you got with Fatherland, that sense of universe is opening up in front of you over which you are now exercising total control?
Yes, I certainly did with Pompeii and also the Cicero books. And each time you go into a book, it's a new world, and it's just marvellous. Writers like Somerset Maugham and Graham Greene, they used to travel, for inspiration, South Seas, Caribbean, Africa, and I voyage in time, really. I go with my notebook to 17th century England, 19th century France, or Britain on the eve of the First World War, and I learn all I can and make a story out of it, meet the characters and make a story. And I've been very fortunate. It's been a great way to earn a living.
Yes. And now, sort of after the Cicero trilogy, you really do start hopping around a lot, don't you, in terms of from one book to the next?
Yeah, originally the Cicero trilogy, the idea was to bring them all out annually, but I just was publicising the first volume, Imperium, when I had the idea for the Ghost.
Right.
And that was a book that really needed to be written urgently, and so the publishers agreed do that, and then do volume 2 of the Cicero trilogy, and that became really the pattern. Then I would do a Roman book, and then I'd do 1 or even 2 other books. And
more modern.
Yeah.
We haven't talked about films. What's that like? Obviously, some of these films have been ridiculously successful. The relationship you have with them is what exactly?
Well, it varies. Sometimes they're great, and sometimes they're not, and sometimes you're heavily involved, and sometimes they don't want to speak to you at all. So there's no hard and fast rule. You have very little control over it. You can have a bit of control over who will be the screenwriter, and
right.
And they don't, by and large, want you to trash the film. So you do have some influence. But it's really, these things take on a life of their own. And they've bought it. They're making an investment in it. So, you can't really dictate. So it's been a varied experience. I didn't like the film of Fatherland, which was made for television, for HBO. I did like Enigma. I like the 2 that I wrote, with Roman Polanski, and I thought Conclave was tremendous. But who knows? I don't know whether another one will be made, or what it would be like if it is made.
Doesn't change anything for you. So Conclave going bonkers doesn't really change your world much. It's just an enjoyable experience.
It's an enjoyable experience. It's definitely raised interest around the world in my books, and not just a film tie-in edition of Conclave, but other books sold on the back of it. It's a powerful thing when a film really goes like that. It does have an effect. But thankfully, I'm long enough in the tooth not to really get too bothered by all of that world.
And now we're back in ancient Rome. With the new one, which of course you're now on the front cover as the #1 best-selling author of Conclave. I wonder, do you ever track what the tagline is with the success
it
and otherwise?
Changes,
yes, of course it does.
Yes, it changes with the seasons. But I would say the best thing. I mean, don't get me wrong, James. I know how fortunate I've been, and I think one of the best things is that the old books people still read, and I think partly that's because most of them are historical, and so they don't date. I mean, Fatherland, it doesn't really date. It's set
I nearly said a moment ago they could film it again tomorrow. They could have another crack at making a film of it because the story's utterly timeless.
It is talked of, yes, but
sure
the rights belong to HBO, so Yes, exactly. I had a great film agent, now retired, and the only bum deal he ever did was Fatherland, because I was just starting out. And
of course,
normally you get a kind of license for these things for 10 years or something, but in that case, not.
So Agrippa, the new novel out now, as we speak, or as people listen to this. people will know roughly what to expect, but they will still expect to be taken by surprise somewhat.
Yes, well, I came across Agrippa when I was writing Pompeii. He built the aqueduct, that's the centre of that novel. And then I came across him again as Cicero. He was the right-hand man of Octavius, as he then was, the heir to Caesar, who eventually does for Cicero. And he always struck me as a fascinating figure. He was hugely powerful, successful, general, admiral, builder. He built the Pantheon in Rome, the most popular tourist attraction in Italy, a historical site in Italy. And yet we know virtually nothing about him. He was sort of erased from history. We have the dates of his career, but we don't know anything really about his family background, except that it was plebeian and not at all patrician. And
like yours.
Yes, exactly. Well, quite often these books are about provincial outsiders. Cicero, yes, was a provincial outsider. You know, you're not conscious of it, but these characters do draw you on. So this kind of self-made man who was at the right hand of Octavius, later Emperor Augustus, fascinated me. What is his story? We don't know anything about his inner life. So this is perfect for a historical novelist, really.
It's a blank canvas.
Yeah.
Really. And also, I mean, as you mentioned allegory before, the notion of being friends with power, friends with powerful people, while also being at work when you are being friends with powerful people, and whether the friendship can survive.
Well, that's it. Can friendship and power go together? It's pretty rare, to be honest, because you're naturally pulled apart, and the people that get to the top in politics are ambitious themselves. I don't think Agrippa ever really seriously thought that he could supplant his friend, but I think he must have resented the fact his friend took all the credit, and indeed took his sons, because he arranged for Agrippa to marry, Augustus arranged for him to marry his daughter, and then when she duly gave birth to 2 sons, he insisted on adopting them. I can't believe he would have taken all of this quietly, but he had to take it. And this notion of friendship in politics and partnership, going back to Blair, there's a little bit of the Blair-Brown thing in this relationship, with Augustus being the Blair figure, the front man, and then this brooding workhorse, brilliant brooding workhorse in the background. But unlike Brown, Agrippa never struck at Augustus.
And there's no Alistair Campbell.
Well, there are various schemers floating around, but there is no direct comparison. Although it's fascinating to me the extent to which Augustus was a master of PR.
Yeah.
There is no accurate representation of what Augustus looked like. He was apparently short, unprepossessing figure, often ill. All we have is this godlike Apollo youth statue, which was turned out in the hundreds across the empire. He was careful never to be represented. I mean, this is an extraordinary, clever, sophisticated use of myth.
And is the next one gestating? Is there...
I have a couple of ideas, but whether I'll be able to write it next year, I don't know. I really love writing a book in 6 months and have feeling that tightening of the stomach of a deadline. It's nerve-wracking, but it makes you feel alive, actually. So I might try and write one next year, but we'll just see how it goes.
As I mentioned, Agrippa by Robert Harris is out now. Robert Harris, thank you.
Thank you.
This has been a global production.